Good mythical afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is your 7.2 vlog, Challenges to the New Government. This is all about the foreign policy issues that George Washington had during his tenure as president. Please make sure, as always, that you are writing down your notes and that you're looking at this as many times as you need. At the end of this, there will be a question to put on the discussion board that I will be saying out loud. So please make sure you view this as many times as possible. So 7.2. So the first thing is we had to deal with securing the Northwest Territory. If you remember, this was all the land that we gained after the American Revolution, and the strongest resistance to this growth in the Northwest area was the Native Americans, because they really did not like the idea of more Americans getting closer and closer to their territory and their ancestral lands. So in 1791, we get to the Battle of Fallen Timbers. So what ends up happening is the Native Americans fight the brand spanking new American army and lost quite quickly. And the Native Americans then asked help from Britain. And of course, Britain's going to refuse because they're a little bit concerned with their lack of money and the issues that are going on in France during this moment. So please make sure that you understand that and look at the French Revolution as we move on. So what ends up happening is the Treaty of Greenville is signed, which the Native Americans surrender a whole bunch of land in what would become the states of Ohio and Indiana to the Americans. So the Whiskey Rebellion. So the government had needed some more money. And that's always been a major issue. And what's kind of neat, though, is under the U.S. Constitution, the government was finally able to levy taxes. So they decided that they're going to use what we call an excise tax to tax whiskey to help pay for the war debts. And this actually really made a lot of farmers mad because a lot of the times whiskey in the western frontier was actually used as money because it was just too difficult to get money back in that area because our currency was still fluctuating quite a bit, and because of the bad roads that by the time you actually brought your whiskey over into the corn that turns into whiskey over the mountain ranges to the ports, most of the corn would be rotten, so you might as well distill it and make some money off of whiskey. So of course a lot of farmers got really kind of ticked off about this and decided to rebel, in particular those in western Pennsylvania. And Washington, not being a guy to take this laying down and wanted to show that the government was not as weak as under the Articles, Washington sends 13,000 troops to crush the rebellion. And what's kind of neat is he is the only sitting president to actually lead troops into battle, and he does that. And when he shows up with that many men, the rebellion just kind of disappears, and the army ends up prevailing because you don't mess with General Washington, or at this time, President Washington. So from there in 1789, the French decided to rebel against King Louis XVI and the Queen Marie Antoinette. And a lot of this came from all the money that they gave the Americans during the Revolutionary War to help us beat Britain. And so what the French did is they increased taxes on the poorest. Those who were wealthy, noble, or clergy were not taxed, but those who were poor, peasants, or middle class were heavily taxed. And anytime that you tax people and they don't get the equal services, they kind of get ticked off. So what they do is they start rebelling, they take over the government, and in 1791 this becomes extremely violent, and they actually chop off the heads of King and Queen King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette, and it goes into what we call the Reign of Terror. By using that item over on the right-hand side known as the guillotine. And yes, that dude is holding a head in his hands. So Americans, of course, with any issue are divided. And the U.S. still had this treaty to help France, but we didn't know who we were going to help because it became too violent. Who do we help? Do we help the king and queen that supported us in our rebellion against the British, or do we help the people as a fellow republic who wanted to have their own powers, their own liberties, and be able to control their own government? So Washington decided that he was going to do what we call the neutrality idea. So Washington wanted to keep the nation neutral and stay out of the wars in Europe, as you will see later when we read Washington's farewell address. So because we were neutral and wanted to trade both with France and with Britain, Britain decides to start seizing our ships in 1792 because Britain wanted to stop us from trading with the French. So Washington sends Chief Justice John Jay to get the treaty, to try to get the British to stop. And so what happens is we get Jay's treaty, which Britain said they would pay for the seized ships, but still would not open the West Indies, the British West Indies, to trade. At the same time, in 1795, Pinckney's Treaty was written, which was a treaty with Spain that allowed free movement on the Mississippi. It tells us what the borders with Spanish Florida would be, and gives us free trade and no customs in New Orleans, which was the largest trading port in North America during this time. And you got to remember, our western frontier is bordered by the Mississippi River, and that was the only way to send trade, is you would send it down the Mississippi River and then out through the Gulf of Mexico from New Orleans to trade out into the greater world. So, as always, please review your notes, and your question for this week is, what do you think was the biggest foreign policy concern of Washington's presidency? And as always, don't forget to be awesome.